There is absolutely no way that one cannot be unmoved by the images of absolute carnage that are coming in from the Gaza Strip. As we speak, the horrors have not ended and they're not likely to end for quite some time. Innocent civilians continue to face down the barrel. The death toll is rising by the hour. Borders have been cut off for Gaza and the people have absolutely nowhere to run to. No one, at this moment, no one is holding Israel's government accountable for openly committing what can only be described as war crimes. Now, the West Asian nations have been trying to exert some amount of influence on Hamas, but reports have said that Qatar will be negotiating for the hostage situation. But authorities have said that it is perhaps too soon for negotiations to begin. But the question is, how soon is too soon, and when can this absolute carnage end? Now take a look at what the Geneva Convention has to say on the protection of the civilian people in times of war. Here we are quoting Article 15 from the provisions. It says that any party to the conflict in the regions where fighting is taking place, the neutralized zones intended to shelter from the effects of war, the following people without distinction must be protected. Firstly, the wounded and the sick, combatants or non-combatants. Secondly, civilian people who take no part in hostilities and who, while they reside in the zones, perform no work of a military character. These people should be protected, and under no circumstance should they be targeted by militaries. Clearly, the rules of basic humanity and warfare and the International Code of War Crimes have been flouted and been done very openly. But not once have we heard a condemnation about the war crimes that are being committed at this moment. Israel has ratified the Geneva Conventions. It did so on the 6th of July 1951, 3 years after declaring independence, and at the same time, it had displaced about 750,000 Palestinian Arabs from their homes. A tragedy that the Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. Now, as Gaza runs out of basic supplies, Israel has shown absolutely no remorse and no mercy in the bombardments that it has carried out. It is not just the people in Gaza who are being bombed, even those who are trying to run away from this carnage, who are lining up at the Rafah crossing, who also come under attack. As Egypt tried to send truckfuls of aid for the Palestinian civilians, even that was stopped. The question is this: does the Israeli government want the Gazans to die of deprivation? The whole world at this moment is watching this carnage unfold, but the question that a lot of world leaders need to ask is, why is it that civilians cannot be protected? And why is it that civilians are being targeted in this absolutely brazen manner? Is the US support to Israel giving the latter a free hand to do as it pleases when 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza have openly been made and turned into a direct target? All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of how civilians have been targeted in this escalation of hostilities that has happened since Saturday, we're being joined in by Professor Scott Lucas, who is Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute, University College Dublin, is joining us live from Birmingham. Now, Professor, this is something that a lot of people around the world who are watching the war unfold between Israel and Hamas at this moment are asking. The governments may have their respective agendas, but at this moment, it is the common civilians who are paying the ultimate price. Why is it that no Western government at this moment has called for human rights of those who are being bombed be respected?
Yeah, well, I think the first fact, and we try to stick with facts rather than emotions, that distinguishes this from 2008, 2014, 2021, when many civilians were killed, most of them by the Israelis, in conflict with Gaza. What makes this different is that Hamas's attack last weekend was not only a ground incursion as well as the firing of rockets into Israel, but it was the commission of war crimes by Hamas, because for the first time, they carried out a mass killing of civilians. Clearly the attacks, for example, on a music festival, on families on their homes, on people in the streets, on kibbutz, in some cases with more than 100 people being killed in an individual community. These were not military targets. So that Hamas commission of a war crime in phase one leads us to phase two, when Israel was going to retaliate to any type of Hamas attack. We knew that would happen. Hamas knew that would happen. But Israel's retaliation will be even more intense on Gaza. And of course, when you have 2.3 million people packed into such a tight area, they won't just kill Hamas fighters, they'll kill civilians that you've been describing. And they'll cut off electricity, they'll cut off water, they'll besiege people. In other words, they will commit war crimes in responding to Hamas's war crimes.
Professor Lucas, if I can just quickly interject you there. The fact is we knew that this kind of retaliation was coming in from the state of Israel, but the question is larger. This is not the first time that Israel has responded in this manner. Every single time there is a crisis, Israel's blanket approach to things is to go out and carry these unrelenting air raids, where bombs that weigh about 2,000 pounds are dropped in highly dense civilian localities. Why is it that the Western powers that talk of democracy and human rights not try rein in the state of Israel, and the United States here, as it always does, is arming Israel with more such weapons?
Well, at one level, they are trying to rein in Israel. The United States, Europe, other countries, Australia, Canada, don't want to see a disproportionate Israeli response. They don't want to see tens of thousands of civilians being killed. That's one reason why Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, is in the region. That's a reason why countries are trying to arrange for the evacuation of civilians out through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. But I have to be honest with you, at the same time, what I've seen from the international community, and again, not just the United States, and also from some countries like Mexico, whom you might not expect, is a condemnation of Hamas. And I think it's a decision by some of these countries that Hamas has got to go. That if Hamas is not removed from power in Gaza, you're going to get into this cycle of violence again and again. Now, I will add to this, my personal opinion,
very quickly,
that Hamas has got to go, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has got to go in Israel. Only when you remove the leaders of these countries in both Israel and Gaza that have exploited the violence for their own ends and have made civilians hostages and been willing to have them killed, only when you remove the leadership are you going to see any type of address of this.
Absolutely indeed, Professor Lucas. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us those insights. We're completely short of time, but probably what needs to be done at this moment is for common sense to prevail, for fighting to end, and for the rights of the civilians to be respected. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Lucas, for joining us with that perspective there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.